land of glory. We the Amazonians pledge our loyalty. Praise the Son of Savior who granted us our freedom. Allegiance to the hero who bought the land with their blood. Glory to the glory, we rise and never to fall. Here in a nation flowing with milk and honey. Glory, glory, glory to the Father for making a nation and triumph forevermore. Amazonia, land of freedom, you shall live in plenty, meeting our need. And your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God be the watchman of this nation. Amazonia, land of freedom, you shall live in plenty, meeting our needs. And your children shall be like the stars above. The Most High God be the watchman of this nation.
Happy Independence Day!
Happy
Independence Day!
Happy.
Let us not turn our attention and listen to the man that carries the Amazonian Bible in his hand. The Right Honorable Professor Carson Anyangwe, right here with us in Soweto, Villa Kazi Street, the only street in the world with 2 Nobel Peace Prize winners in South Africa, and not the national monologue, Yaone. Prof.
Invincible people of Amazonia. French Cameroon colonial occupation and brutal oppression of Amazonia is now close to 60 years. That country is daily plundering and looting the resources of Amazonia, violently imposing on the people, humiliating them, and terrorizing them. The die was cast 3 years ago. We took one giant step to end our shameful status of a colonized people. Like our slaves, we revolted. The colonial oppressor then demonstrated its determination to exterminate us and steal our homeland. It unleashed an unjust war on us. Since then, we have been in the throes of an existential armed threat. We are fighting for survival as a people. We are literally fighting with bare hands, apparently with no expertise in the art of war. But against all odds, we continue to resist the mighty onslaught of a well-resourced French Cameroon army backed by mercenaries and well-known foreign governments. But we remain defiant and undaunted.
Oh, yes.
We shall fight for the next 100 years if needs be.
Yeah.
We shall fight on until our homeland is totally liberated.
Yes.
We shall fight on until we are free.
Yes.
We shall fight on until we unfetter the shameful shackles around our necks and hands like those of the slaves of old.
Yes.
We shall fight on until we defeat the enemy.
Yes.
We do not doubt success and final victory.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Let the world know and bear witness that we are fighting for decolonization of Amazonia.
Yes.
That territory is historically and legally our homeland.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
It has been ours from time immemorial.
That's correct.
It belongs to us
Yeah.
and none other.
Oh, yes.
Sovereignty over it lies on us,
Yes.
the people of Amazonia. No other people can possibly accept a superior title to that land. It is our right and duty to institute a government on that territory,
Oh, yes.
laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to us seems most likely to secure our national interests, our safety, our welfare, and our happiness.
Yes.
No one, no country, no organization should presume to do so for us
Oh, yes.
or to deflect us from doing so.
Yes.
In the past, we allowed the United Nations to impose on us an unwarranted and choiceless plebiscite that took place on 11 February 1961. We attended a purposeless and agendaless charade in Fumban in July 1961. We submitted to an existential and annexation document framed and adopted by French Cameroon on 1st September 1961 and dressed up as a so-called federal constitution, whereas it was a mere framework for the cannibalization of Ambazonia. We submitted on the 30th of September 1961 to a British transfer of powers, not to the government of the Southern Cameroon as ought to have been the case, but to a foreign country, namely French Cameroon, resulting in the recolonization rather than the decolonization of the Southern Cameroons. We submitted on 1st October 1961 to occupation by French Cameroon forces and to rule by a French Cameroon proconsul, deceptively styled as the Federal Inspector of Administration. We allowed in 1962 French Cameroon to extend to Ambazonia its torture outfits and a draconian subversion ordinance that sanctioned the trial of our people on military tribunals for a number of ill-defined crimes and, in effect, made every Ambazonia a prisoner in the closed society imposed on us by French Cameroon, practically converting our space of existence into an open prison system. We submitted in 1962 to French Cameroon imposition of its French colonial currency, its metric system, its language of driving on the right-hand side of the road, and of the French language as a language of governance. We allowed in 1966 French Cameroon to impose on us its one-party despotic rule. We failed in 1972 to oppose the odious plot and historical swindle of a so-called referendum, which purported to have given a veneer of suspect legality to the continuing cannibalization of Ambazonia. We failed in February 1984 to confront Biya when he purported to have completed the cannibalization of Ambazonia by resurrecting extinct La République du Cameroon as a legal, territorial, and political expression, while at the same time asserting an unsubstantiated territorial aggrandizement claim to the territory of Ambazonia. We failed in 1990 and 1992 to reject the poisonous and conditional fake peace discourse of French Cameroon. We failed in 1994 at the tripartite to reject and denounce French Cameroon's continuing perfidy and efforts to get us to accept a brutal colonial rule and oppression. We allowed ourselves in 1910 to be manipulated by French Cameroon's deceptive and aggressive use of the term reunification to think that the independence of French Cameroon involved us and that our homeland is part of the territory of French Cameroon. We allowed ourselves to be hoodwinked in 2016 to agree to a so-called dialogue with the devil. A dialogue which ended up with the kidnapping and incarceration of our then leadership. Fellow Ambazonians, all this is nonsense, and this nonsense is over now. Now. Never again shall we give ear to and act on anything other than what we as a sovereign people have decided.
Never again.
French Cameroon, like an invalid, has used Ambazonia as footstool for decades. It has got free lunch from Ambazonia for over 5 decades. It must now grow up, get rid of its mentality of an invalid, start living on its own, and begin to cater for itself. The era of Santa Claus is over. Over. On this auspicious occasion, I pay tribute to the memory of our valorous soldiers who have gained honorable death in battle.
Oh, yes.
I pay tribute to all those, including babies and elderly, who have been cowardly assassinated by enemy forces.
Oh, yes.
I commiserate with all those who have been raped or maimed. I salute all our valiant people, our brave refugees and internally displaced persons. I salute our gallant and resourceful freedom fighters. We stand together until the end.
Yes.
I salute our friends who continue to stand by us in various ways in this hour of great tribulation.
Oh, yes.
The darkest hour of our history as a people. Our life of sorrow will not last for long.
No.
May our enemy be put to eternal shame.
Oh, yes.
May our merciful Lord hasten the advent of our redemption.
Yes.
Darkness tarries only for a while before dawn.
Yes.
The dawn of national liberation, the dawn of a free people, is about to break.
Oh, yes.
Long live the invincible people of Ambazonia.
Long live.
Long live Ambazonia.
Long live. Long live. Long live. Ambazonia. Freedom. 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 Ambazonia.
Freedom, freedom, freedom.
Ambazonia as a land in its entirety, and Vilakazi Street, Hector Peterson Museum, where we choose, as Ambazonians in South Africa, to celebrate this particular day.
This spot where we are standing here in South Africa symbolizes and represents resistance to oppression. And we, the people of Ambazonia, we are resisting a most brutal oppression and colonization that has never been seen on this continent of Africa. And like I said, like the children of Soweto, like South Africa resisted, we are going to resist, and we shall be resisting until we get freedom.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. Thank you so much. And Prof. Anyangwe, we grew up hearing this name, Prof. Anyangwe, over the decades. We in South Africa are very blessed that we are standing right beside you, and I think we know you better. Many still watch you on TV. For how many decades? I wanted to say years, but that's then a wrong question. For how many decades have you been in this struggle, and what inspires you so that our people who came into the struggle initially hoping La Republic will do the minimal of the correct thing, federation, and they told us we were rotten ducks, then understand the fire behind you until date? What inspired you all this long? How long have you been in the struggle?
My activism for freedom started in the days when I was still in secondary school and the university in Yaoundé. But you may reckon my period of engagement in our national struggle and conscientiousness as from the 80s. And this is when I got face to face with some great minds like Albert Mukong, great minds like Gorge Dinka, who opened my eyes even in those young days into seeing the kind of depravity and the kind of colonial subjugation in which we are. I resolved then that I will not rest until our people become free, and that I will contribute my might in whatever possible way we can to ensure that the burden and the oppression we've been witnessing shall never be transferred over to our own children. And that our children have a right to inherit a country which they can live in peace and be proud of, where they can be frightened and terrorized every day by a colonial regime. Those have been my concerns, and they continue to be my concern until Ambazonia is free.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. So if I got you, you've been in the struggle for almost 40 years, 30 years?
Yes, you may reckon that, that's true. That's true.
I don't want to point to some young people here and ask what is their age. Prof, we spent almost an hour or more going through the Hector Peterson Museum, where we were able to be inspired or to see the South African struggle from the perspective of young people. We are standing right at the memorial of Hector Peterson, who was killed at the age of 12. But if there's one thing that draws my attention a lot, as we came out of the museum, it was the word consciousness.
Yes.
Black consciousness.
Yes.
Do you want to speak to the substance of Ambazonian consciousness from 2016 to present date, compared to some 10-20 years ago when you and just a few like Albert Mukong championed the freedom of the people of Ambazonia?
Ambazonian consciousness, and what we might also call Ambazonian nationalism, has gathered pace since 2016. Before then, this was considered something which only a few people were espousing. People were looking with some curiosity. What are we talking about? But since 2016, we have seen a great metamorphosis. There has been a psychological liberation of most of our people, and the consciousness has now settled that we shall settle for nothing but an independent Ambazonia. Looking at these museums here and seeing the pictures and seeing the things is an example of what youths have done. Youths have always been, and it's not for anything that South Africans regard the youth as the spear of the nation. Because the youth, very idealistic, but also very, very determined. And they know what they want. They reject accommodation and compromise on the part of the elderly, who think they know everything all, but who in actual fact are living in the past. The youth are the people who still have their future in front of them. And they're eager to fashion that future, to contribute in making that future, where they can live a life of freedom and peace and be proud of themselves. And that is why, if you look at this museum here, the young people who revolted in 1976, against what? Just a language issue. And they say, we reject Afrikaans.
Africans, yes.
We reject it. The hell with Afrikaans. And we might say, the hell with French Cameroon. The hell with French.
The hell with French.
The same kind of thing they experience is what we have been experiencing for the past 50 years at the hands of the French colonial oppressor. So it's an eye-opening experience to come to this museum here and see what the youth did. Hundreds and thousands of them who faced the bullet. And from what the guy told us, over 600 of them were mowed down and killed.
Yes.
They were not deterred. They carried on the revolution. And I would suggest that revolution eventually led to the ANC's victory and the freedom of South Africa.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Prof, today is the 1st of October, our Independence Day, also celebrated around the world. If there's something you share with Tata Nelson Mandela, our big icon for Africa, whose house where he led the revolution to free this country, is just about 5 minutes from here, walking, is that you were branded a terrorist at some point, and Madiba was equally branded a terrorist. And eventually the same people who called him a terrorist, the British, the Americans, and so on, they worship the ground on which he walked until this date. So what I want you to tell Ambazonians is, why are we not terrorists? Why are we not secessionists? Why are we restorationists? Because we must never allow people to define us.
You are very correct. We define ourselves. We can never allow people to define us. One of the ironies of colonialism and colonial oppression is that the oppressor, because he knows that he is standing on shifting grounds, always rushes to call the oppressed a terrorist. During the War of American Independence, the Americans who were fighting for their independence were terrorists as in the British eyes. All the liberation movements found on this continent of Africa here, they were all terrorists. Everybody. Our great Nelson Mandela was a terrorist, they said. So when you're fighting for freedom, and rightly so, you're a terrorist in the eye of the oppressor. So do not be unduly worried by the label of terrorism. And in any case, that label is not new. If you go to the archives and look well back in the 60s, we're called terrorists, we're called secessionists, we're called all kinds of names. That has not deterred us and will never, ever deter us. These people are called terrorists. So in any case, we welcome the name in our own context. We know very well that the label of terrorism attaches more to French Cameroon that has graduated from a police state in the 60s and the 70s to become a terrorist state. By the very definition of a terrorist state, that country fits that very definition in every way, shape, or form. A terrorist state.
Thank you.
Tomorrow will not be terrorists. They will call us, we're all, freedom fighters. And I've noticed that even they themselves have metamorphosed. Most of them say, they no longer say we're secessionists. They now say what?
Armed groups.
No, armed groups. They say we're separationists. We are separating from what?
From what?
Here is a territory, a country, which was exactly at the same level legally with French Cameroon, a Class B mandated territory. And we own that land, and we've always owned it. Its borders are well defined. How can anybody say we're seceding from what? From the air? No. The boat is in the other leg. They are the ones who have tried, using all kinds of crook methods in the book, to steal our land. To make us believe that we are their slaves. To make us believe that our land is part of their territory. It shall never be. It has never been, and it will never be.
Never be, yeah. Never.
And that is my message. And I think it's high time French Cameroon gets used to the fact that it has to run its own affairs. It has to cater for itself. It has to look for its own resources and start depending upon Ambazonia. We are a free people. We're born free, and we shall remain free.
Absolutely.
They cannot cage us in a situation of colonialism, in a situation of depravity, in a situation of oppression. No people in the world can ever accept that. I will never accept it.
Thank you, Prof. So, Vuvuzela itself from Mandela Land. Thank you very much. And to you, fellow Ambazonian citizens, you must never allow anybody define you. Cameroon never conquered us at war. Our land is ordained. It is a land we will reclaim. We will restore our stolen state. It is critical. Do take note, you can only become a secessionist if you're part of a whole, as at the day they had independence. And we all know that when La Republic had their independence, we were not part of them. And we would never be part of them. That is so important. Prof, I want to move to the question of political prisoners. Nelson Mandela was judged as a terrorist and given a life sentence alongside Walter Sisulu, Oliver Tambo, and so on. I mean, all the great leaders that are celebrated in this country in every shape, form, or size. We now have a case where our own leaders, beginning from the leader of our revolution, Sisiko Ayok-Tabe, Patasang, Pafo, Professor Awasum, Penn Terence, Barrister Shufai, and all of them, T. Conrad, they have equally been slammed crazy jail sentences. And of course, members of the Ambazonian community, their own local communities and their families feel a sense of great loss at a time when they should be contributing their own quarter towards the freedom of Ambazonia. What message do you give to Ambazonians when inexistent laws are being used, chariot laws, to try to silence the voice of our people, when the Ambazonian consciousness has now moved to what I call an unstoppable gear? What is the message to political detainees in particular?
Notice that in the history of decolonization, whenever the colonial authority has laid its hands on the leaders, freedom fighters, its first task has always been to imprison them. Kwame Nkrumah went the same route. Mugabe went the same route. In Kenya, Kenya's leader, Jomo Kenyatta, went the same route. Here in South Africa, a famous Nelson Mandela went the same route. This is a price which all freedom fighters are bound to pay at some point. That when you fight for freedom, you pay a certain price. And that's the price which they are paying for that freedom. But the point to remember is, whereas in those other jurisdictions, they could have been sentenced, or they were sentenced, by a legitimate jurisdiction. In our case, it was a fake tribunal applying some fake laws. So the jail term, as far as the eyes of a conscientious person, as far as the eyes of the conscientious world is concerned, this is merely a terroristic act. It has nothing to do with application of the law. It has nothing to do with a legitimate tribunal. So once you hijacked victims, you go through the motion of a so-called trial by a tribunal which is illegal, applying a law which is illegal, which does not come up to international standards. You simply reinforce the very concept, the very idea that you are a terroristic state. And that's what it is. The first duty of any oppressor is to reject the laws, the so-called laws of the oppressor. If you accept the law of the oppressor, then frankly, why are you rebelling?
Absolutely.
So part of that rebellion is to reject the rule and the law of the oppressor. So we reject not only its French Cameroon colonial administration, but French Cameroon authority, French Cameroon laws, and French Cameroon anything, and we're prepared to fight and combat those laws because they do not stand up to any standard of law as far as international law is concerned. So that's part of our responsibility, to deconstruct all that narrative.
Thank you, Prof. So to Comrade Abdul Karim, Senator Penn Terence, Barrister AMBA, Dr. Kimen, and every single one of our people detained, we ask you to continue to resist like you did during the prison route. There is nothing La Republic can do. Even if they kill every one of us living, the Ambazonian stones will rise up and fight for us. Prof, the very last question I want to ask you. La Republic in their monologue, at the time when the world was expecting La Republic to get into meaningful dialogue or negotiations that addresses the root causes of the problem, it's running its chariot under Dion Gute in Yaoundé. And there was news circulating on French Cameroon channels that are on Right Honorable Professor Anyangwe, right here with us in South Africa, is in an imaginary hall in Yaoundé doing the monologue, dialogue, or whatever you call it. What message do you have to give these clowns?
Well, they should just simply carry on to what you aptly describe as a charade. I've already issued a disclaimer. I cannot in any way or any form or shape participate in something which does not concern Ambazonians. If French Cameroon wants to organize a jamboree, an eating feast for their people, that is their problem. But in relation to Ambazonia, that thing is what we call without any object. And that is where I stand.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Prof. We would like the international community to know that the government and people of Ambazonia are ready, were ready, and will get into any negotiation that ends the senseless La Republic declared war, that ends the bloodshed, that ends the genocide. But such negotiations must happen under conditions that are civilized. Number one, it must be on neutral territory. What currently happening in Yaoundé is a La Republic to La Republic dialogue, La Republic citizens talking amongst themselves. We advise them that we are waiting for them in the diaspora. We are waiting for them on safe territory. We are waiting for them, and they must ensure that every single Ambazonian who is a political prisoner, a prisoner of conscience, is released. They must pull out the terrorist forces that continue to terrorize our people and our neighborhoods. They must ensure that we agree on whoever the mediator is. Such a mediator, in our opinion, must be credible, must be independent, and must be unbiased. We from South Africa want to tell you, our people on ground zero, on ground one, and in the diaspora, that we love you, that the struggle is on. It is unstoppable. Nobody can stop it until we move into a free Ambazonia. So you join me and let's send a message. Happy Independence Day! Happy Independence Day! Happy Independence Day!
La lucha
continua. Ambazonia must be free.